Pakistani garrisons and hit Dhaka.
It was on the table, the paper. So I said, do you accept this instrument to surrender? He never answered. I asked him 3 times. Then I picked it up, held it high, and said, I take it as accepted.
The operation was a perfect synergy of the Army, Navy and Air Force. The IAF had complete air supremacy over the eastern skies. IAF also destroyed airfields in then East Pakistan to deny either China or US an opportunity to even think of landing troops there. Navy not only blockaded and bombed Karachi, but also denied the Pakistan Navy the use of Bay of Bengal. The Indian Armed Forces, which had learnt a major lesson from the 1962 debacle and the 1965 Indo Pak War, are credited with many firsts in this operation. Liberation of Bangladesh was carried out by 19 divisions of the Indian Army. Never before or again has the Army used so many troops in any operation. The many firsts include the biggest airdrop at Tengale, the first amphibious assault at Cox's Bazar, the first heli bridge over River Padma, complete air supremacy on the eastern skies. But this blitzkrieg would never have been possible without the active and in-depth role of the Mukti Jodhas of the Mukti Bahini.
Many in India do not recognize the role that Mukti Bahini played in India's greatest victory. And many in India believe that the Bangladeshis are not grateful enough. But we don't realize that we should be grateful to Mukti Bahini for facilitating the greatest victory that India achieved in recent years.
With just 3,000 troops, Indian Army surrounded Dhaka and forced 20,000 heavily armed Pakistan Army troops to surrender. This is because India broke Pakistan's morale with its total supremacy on land, sea and air. A war that had the people of Bangladesh fight shoulder to shoulder with the Indian Army. A war won because it was a just war. A war for the birth of Bangladesh. So confident was the army of the Indian Air Force that convoys moved bumper to bumper in their dash to Dhaka. The Indian Air Force had total air supremacy of the skies in the east. So confident was the Air Force of Navy's total sea control that Pakistan Air Force could not even get their supplies and spares and stores to pose a challenge. 1971 was truly a tri-services operation.
The Indian Army may have been the toast of the 1971 war, mounting a brilliant, memorable land forces campaign to liberate Bangladesh, but it was also India's first truly tri-services operation.
So it was a total synergy between Navy, Army and the Air Force which won us the 1971 war.
The Indian Navy and Air Force proved to be formidable game changers in the other two dimensions, driving the war steadily towards its logical conclusion, the crushing defeat of Pakistan. The war at sea has passed into the realm of legend. Pakistan's maritime aggression kicked off with the deployment of attack submarines both in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, a terrifying proposition. But the Indian Navy's Operation Trident smashed the Pakistan Navy where it hurt the most, Karachi. During the war, Indian Navy vessels mounted a fearsome attack in the Arabian Sea, sinking Pakistani destroyer PNS Khyber and minesweeper PNS Muhafiz. They quickly followed with Operation Python, where Indian torpedo boats attacked Karachi by night, destroying Pakistan's massive naval fuel reserves and paralyzing its maritime strength. On the 9th of December, however, the Indian Navy lost a frigate, INS Kukri, in the Arabian Sea, a huge loss. In the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Navy put in place a brilliant blockade, effectively incapacitating warships of East Pakistan. Things were taken to the next level when Pakistan secretly slipped in a submarine, PNS Ghazi, into the Bay of Bengal, tasked with sinking the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant and destroying the blockade. But the hapless boat was detected and destroyed in a work of genius by Indian destroyer INS Rajput. According to one estimate, the Pakistan Navy lost 1/3 of its force levels in the 1971 war alone. Faced with a progressively wilting Pakistan Air Force, the Indian Air Force achieved air superiority on both fronts. Pakistan's lack of meaningful offensive operations seemed to be a considered move to mitigate the huge losses it had already incurred in the conflict.
After day one, another 2 hunters joined in, and 4 hunters had a whale of a time firing at these people. And if my memory remains with me, 54 tanks were destroyed in that 3-day period.
Air Force and naval combat pilots flew thousands of sorties, giving Pakistani forces in East and West no time to recoup and replan. By the time the war ended, East Pakistan was completely isolated, and the Indian Armed Forces had achieved unquestionable superiority in 3 dimensions.
The Mukti Jodhas of the Mukti Bahini fought shoulder to shoulder with the Indian Army. The story of India's victory in Bangladesh will be incomplete without gratefully acknowledging the role of the Mukti Bahini. From creating a conducive ground for the Tengale drop, to destroying Pakistan Army's communication network, to providing intelligence for Indian Army to move, Mukti Bahini deserves credit for helping India decimate Pakistan in the East.
This was Blitzkrieg, a thundering multi-pronged offensive conducted with brilliant precision and planning. A swift operation that brought an adversary to its knees and gave birth to a new nation. In less than a fortnight, Indian military operations, honed down to the last detail, brought the 1971 war to an end.
We made it bypassing a war movement. It was mobility in this war, mobility. We bypassed and went on. We didn't fight any major battle except few skirmishes. We bypassed and went on to Dhaka. It was mobility. This same strategy was used by the Americans in the Second Gulf War. So it was mobility is the major answer. And the second thing and the most important thing really was logistics. The infrastructure and logistics was built up. We never had to look back. It took time to build it up, and everything was in place. It was logistics that played a key role in our operations.
The army held off the enemy in the west and made several tactical gains into Pakistani territory, making for some of the most memorable battles in the history of the war. But it is the operations in the east that will forever be noted for their singular brilliance. Unlike its previous war with Pakistan in 1965, this time the Indian Army made a thundering 3-pronged strike with 9 infantry divisions and armoured units, zeroing in on Dhaka with resounding swiftness. The army, along with the Mukti Bahini, tore through Pakistani defences until there was nothing left to protect.
We assessed that Niazi would defend towns and territory. Therefore, he concentrated his forces on the border in the towns. Having known that, we then decided on our strategy. It was firstly, the final objective and main objective was Dhaka. The towns were defended. The next, that we would bypass the towns using subsidiary tracks. 2. The third thing, subsidiary objectives would be communications and command and control centers. And lastly, we would, by use of the Mukti Bahini, who played a major role in this war, a critical role, they attacked them to draw them to the border.
The Army's Eastern Commander, Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, led the Indian thrust into East Pakistan and was famously responsible for the tactical planning that saw such rapid success. Aided by ceaseless strikes by the Air Force and a crucial naval blockade in the Bay of Bengal, the Army was free to employ blitzkrieg techniques, smashing through every defense with fearsome regularity. The Pakistani military had no choice. On the threshold of utter obliteration, they buckled in less than a fortnight. On the 16th of December 1971, the country's forces in East Pakistan surrendered unconditionally.
Pakistan attacked 11 Indian airfields along the western border on the 3rd of December 1971. A massive effort to split the war and gain a crucial bargaining chip. Pakistan's war plans were tactically brilliant but strategically disastrous. For India, the war on the Western Front was, in a sense, a territory holding operation. The Indian Navy delivered an unforgiving blow to Pakistan from the seas. 1971 war saw some of the most memorable armored and air attacks, including the unforgettable Battle of Longewala.
It was a blitzkrieg in the east, but a very different story on India's western border. With the Indian Army's overwhelming strength and focus in the east, Pakistan quietly decided to invade from the other side. The defense of East Pakistan lies in the west, General Ayub Khan had once said. His successor and protege, General Yahya Khan, had chosen to fight by those very words. Pakistan's strategy in the Western Front was deceptively simple. Invade, take territory, and then use it to bargain for the end of aggressive hostilities in the east. What Pakistan hadn't accounted for were ill-equipped but inspired defenders on the Indian side.
India's focus in 1971 was on East Pakistan. On the Western theatre, the focus was on a strategic defense. For Pakistan, the situation was quite different. For them, the defense of East Pakistan lay in West Pakistan. And they proposed to achieve this defense by carrying out preliminary operations by the holding troops.
Know at that time, at least at our level, the fighting level, the significance of the two. But we did know that on the Indian side, the army was fairly thin. In fact, there was no formal division holding the border.
The invading Pakistani forces were led by highly able commanders who simply happened to make a string of doomed decisions. Most notably, this included a massive failure of intelligence that hid Indian strike aircraft in the Longewala area, but also the decision to move tanks with no route reconnaissance and mounting a tactical frontal assault with no engineer reconnaissance. The Battle of Longewala was to have been one of the principal entry points for Pakistan to carve out Indian territory and end the war. What it turned out to be was annihilation or recovery of 36 Pakistani tanks and the deaths of 200 Pakistani soldiers, a terrible psychological blow that Pakistan would never recover from.
In the West, there was a defensive-offensive strategy. So what we did was that we actually carried out counter-air attacks against most of the Pakistani airfields in the West, because in Longewala, while our air could operate freely and the kind of destruction that they caused to the Pak armor. But Pakistani Air Force, because they were not in that area.
The hard truth, however, is that the lessons of the war in the West were bitter ones. For instance, India had completely failed to detect such a massive armoured presence on the Pakistan side. The Battle of Longewala may have had one of the largest disproportionate tank casualties for one side in a single battle after World War II, according to one account. But operations in the West shook up the Indian establishment good and proper.
By the evening, 21 tanks were knocked out, and scores of vehicles were also lying destroyed there. So next day, as we know later, the Pakistanis started withdrawing after getting so much of battering.
It was 40 years ago that the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force delivered a shattering blow in one of the most decisive battles of the 1971 war. It wasn't far from here that the Battle of Longewala actually played out. It is one of the most memorable battles of the 1971 war, and it is one that changed the tide of the war on the Western Front. But 40 years later, exercises like Sudarshan Shakti prove that the Indian Army is still preparing for any sort of conventional battle with Pakistan. In the Thar Desert, with camera person Amit Kumar, Shiv Arur for Headlines Today.
The Army, Navy and Air Force acknowledged that victory over Pakistan in 1971 would not have been possible but for Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, India's Iron Lady, a great leader of the masses. She fought battles diplomatically, stood her ground and got international support against all odds. If she was tense about the US and China breathing down India's neck, she did not let the masses know. Her command, victory at all costs and quickly, truly hailed as India's modern-day Durga.
The political and personal role of Indira Gandhi in the Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971 is inseparable from the country's history. Indira extended unequivocal support to the people of the former East Pakistan. She fought and won their freedom struggle for them, and in the process established her credentials as the Iron Lady of Indian politics.
They all coordinated because Mrs. Gandhi ensured that everybody will coordinate, everybody will fight as one team. There's the Army or the IB or the RNW or BSF and all. So it was teamwork. It was teamwork made possible, led by Mrs. Gandhi.
71 was her biggest success. It was a masterstroke by her.
India under Indira Gandhi fought the war along with the Mukti Bahini, first indirectly but later directly when Pakistan opened another front in India's west. But that wasn't all. The unprecedented atrocities of the Pakistan army led to a mass exodus from Bangladesh. India under Indira Gandhi opened its eastern borders, allowing safe refuge for an estimated 10 million people. They fled their homes to the neighboring West Bengal, Tripura, Meghalaya and Assam. She helped settle the government in exile of Bangladesh with imprisoned Mujibur Rahman as its president. Supported by the then socialist bloc led by the Soviet Union, Indira Gandhi, despite being the lone voice against the mighty United States, traveled across the world to mobilize support for the beleaguered people of Bangladesh.
She went around the world, not necessarily to lobby for Bangladesh, but to say, look, the world must take note of the fact that there is genocide taking place in East Pakistan, and millions of refugees are pouring into India.
An effort that went a long way in giving a nation its much-needed international recognition. Finally, on the 19th of March 1972, a friendship treaty was signed, forging close bilateral relations between India and the newly established state of Bangladesh. Bangladesh was now a reality, and India was ready to nourish and cherish the newborn.